Hey everyone, and welcome to today's video. So today I want to answer a question I had when I first started using pedals, and I think it might be something that a lot of players who are first getting into using effects or stomp boxes might have questions about, and that's what's the difference between drive, distortion and fuzz, because in some ways they're all very similar, but in other ways they're also very different. So I think it can sometimes be a little bit tricky when you're first getting started to know which one first off is best suited to what you need, and also which one might best complement what you already have. So I want to talk about each effect individually a little bit to start off with. So we'll talk about some notable pedals within each bracket, some players and some tracks to help identify each effect. And then I'm going to set up a pedal board with one of each, so drive, distortion and fuzz, so we can hear a kind of back-to-back comparison of each effect. So first up we've got Overdrive, and we hear this effect in all sorts of genres of music, including pop, rock, country, blues, metal. Just about any kind of genre of music it's probably been used there somewhere because it's such a versatile effect. It's essentially designed to emulate the sound of an amp being driven, so you can achieve the tone and response, the feel of your amp being on full without necessarily having all the volume that will be associated with using a tube amp in that way. Some notable kind of units, probably the most famous in this category is the Ibanez Tube Screamer and all the variations that came from there, but we've also got the Nobels ODR 1 and we've got the Boss OD1, and like I say, players in just about every genre have used these. So you've got John Mayer, Stevie Ray Vaughan both use one in a kind of blues context in front of their amps to get a really kind of crunchy blues tone. Metal players will tend to use them in front of high gain amps to further saturate their amps and to tighten up the bottom end so they can get a really kind of aggressive rhythm sound. And I think drive is potentially the most common of the three effects that we see. If you look at just about any player's pedal board, you will more than likely see one if not several drive pedals on there. So onto distortion now. This essentially picks up where Overdrive left off. So we get more compression, more sustain, and more saturation. So the toning sounds a little bit thicker, and it can either be dialed to sound more kind of searing if we use more top end, or more kind of thick and warm, I guess, if we were to use less top end but a more saturated kind of sound. Notable units in this bracket, you've got the Boss DS1 and 2, of which John Frusciante was well renowned for using. Amongst others, you've got the Boss Metal Zone, you've got the Rat pedal, which again has been around for quite a while, has been used by an awful lot of players. I know Justin Hawkins used to use one of them at one point. And I think you've also got the MXR Plus pedal, which was used by Randy Rhoads. Again, generally associated with higher gain genres of music, but not exclusive to that. You quite frequently see distortion pedals on pop session players' boards for when they have to kind of come out and do a high gain solo in the middle of a pop song. Lastly now we've got fuzz, and I think this is potentially the most enigmatic of the three. Certainly for me and anyone in my age bracket, I would imagine you probably grew up playing on a Line 6 Spider at some point, which featured a clean, crunch, metal and insane channel. So your crunch was essentially your drive, your metal was distortion, and then insane was kind of more distortion, which was the one that everyone played on when they were 15. I know I certainly did. And so fuzz is a much more kind of chaotic sound. It's even more so hard clipping down the distortion pedal. So we get a lot of kind of noise associated with fuzz, but in a quite a creative way. And I was initially put off by the noise that you get with fuzz pedals, but I think when you kind of learn how to integrate that into your playing, it can be a really kind of satisfying experience to use a fuzz pedal. Notable players, you've got Jimi Hendrix is probably the pioneer of fuzz, really. He used to use the Octavia amongst others. He had Fuzzface, and he would quite frequently combine it with other effects such as phaser and an octave to achieve a really kind of wild kind of sound. So if you check out any of his live solos, you'll hear an example of that there. Other applications, you've got the Solo of Time by Pink Floyd and David Gilmour. Satisfaction by the Rolling Stones is a example of Keith Richards using, I think it was a Gibson fuzz pedal in a kind of less driven capacity, so with not quite as much fuzz dialed in to emulate a horn section. So I mentioned a few already in there, but some of the most iconic fuzz pedals we've got are things like the Octavia. You've got the Fuzzface, the Big Muff, the Tone Bender. So fuzz is again an effect that gets used in all sorts of different genres and different applications. But generally I think we see it less in high gain music, so less in metal, which will veer more down the distortion route. It seems to be more when blues or rock players want to get a really kind of saturated sound without having the distortion, and maybe get something a little bit more wild, like the Jimi Hendrix kind of lead tone when he used to use the Octavia. So I'm going to take us through a few back-to-back examples now. So I've got 3 pedals set up. I've got the Nobels ODR 1 for overdrive, I've got the Suhr Riot Mini for distortion, and then on the left I've got the Seymour Duncan or the Super Rica fuzz. And I'm not going to hone in on any one specifically too much in terms of like a pedal demo. I'm more going to refer to them in terms of their respective effects, so drive, distortion and fuzz. For amp tones, I'm going into the Victory 40, into the Capture X, into Cubase. I've got a little bit of delay going on in there, so just as a reference before I kick anything on. So first up, I'm going to kick on the overdrive. This is the Nobels ODR 1. So we can hear there it's got much, it's got a lot of dynamic range. So if I lighten up with my playing like I did at the end with my fingers, the tone's going to get much cleaner, whereas if I hit it hard with the pick, it's going to sound much more aggressive. So just to demonstrate that one more time. And that's exactly the same settings on the pedal. And that's one of the reasons I like drive pedals. I prefer that kind of, for a lead tone, more so than distortion most of the time, but that's just my personal preference for the kind of style of music I play, I guess. Obviously we can use the effect as much or as little as we like, so if I back the drive down, and then if I kick it a little bit higher, take about 3/4. So that's our overdrive, so a lot of dynamic range in that one, basically very amp-like kind of overdrive. Next up is the Suhr Riot Mini, that's our distortion pedal. So we can hear this is a much more kind of aggressive effect. It's much more kind of hard clipping. We get more compression and saturation. For anyone who's not familiar, compression basically means making your quiet notes louder and your loud notes quieter, so we get a more even kind of output. And the more distortion you use, the more compression will be added with that. Just through the distortion pedal, you don't need another unit for that. What it does mean is that we lose a little bit of the kind of dynamic range because obviously the quieter notes become loud. We can hear we get a lot of sustain out of those notes. And again, if I just back the distortion level down, so it's very 80s sounding with that delay on there. Obviously these pedals are more synonymous with the heavier genres, so metal and harder rock, that kind of thing, whereas the Overdrive is probably more kind of classic rock. So last up now, I'm going to kick on the Super Rica. This is the fuzz pedal. You can hear straight away there, back that off again. We've got a much higher noise floor, and I could have used humbuckers with this, but I actually like the sound of how single coils sound with the fuzz and with the Overdrive. So we are going to get a little bit more hum because I'm not using the humbuckers. And turn that off while I'm talking so we don't get all that hiss on there. So you can hear there, one thing I notice about my own playing when I play a fuzz is that I tend to play less busy parts, and that's because I like the way that the notes bloom. If you play a single note with the fuzz pedal, you kind of hear the note and then you'll hear these other kind of artifacts come with it. So we get a lot of harmonic content in there. It's a very kind of chaotic sound, so sometimes busier parts can sound a little bit kind of crowded, but I do like this specific Seymour Duncan pedal for that because you've got a lot of mid control on here. So if you were to dial up the fuzz, you can dial in some more mids to maintain your clarity. To show it on a more kind of subtle representation of the effect. I tend to find that I use fuzz more on single notes rather than chords, just because it can sound a little bit fuzzy on there. But there have been examples in the past where people have had great tone using chords. I think Smashing Pumpkins used to do that quite a bit, as well as Jack White from the White Stripes. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to take us through kind of back to back an example of each one. So this is the drive first. Into the distortion. And then so that's 12, and we'll go into the fuzz. So hopefully that might have cleared up some questions that people might have had about drive, distortion or fuzz, and kind of where the similarities or differences lie. If anyone has got any other questions though, let me know in the comment section, and also let me know which is your favourite of the three effects. As always, a big thank you for watching, take care, and I'll see you in the next video.